Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Norsca and Whole War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and why it wouldn't make sense for Creative Assembly to add Norsca as part of the Slaanesh DLC. To be certain, I do want a Norsca rework, but I don't want a Norsca rework as part of the Slaanesh DLC. There's a couple of reasons behind that. So first and foremost, let's consider what they're going to do with Slaanesh. So obviously it's going to be Slaanesh. It's going to have a Slaanesh free legendary lord based on what Creative Assembly was talking about in their vlog on the subject. At least that was the impression I and many others did get. So we're going to get the free lord being for Slaanesh. On top of that, we also got to consider that while Chaos has been part of every Warhammer free DLC except the Ogre Kingdoms, which was a pre-order bonus DLC. When we're looking at Chaos being part of the DLC, with the exception of Champions of Chaos, it's been one Chaos race. So having two Chaos races as part of the same DLC would be weird. Sure, other people could talk about Vampire Coast, Vampire Counts, Lizardmen, X number of races. But from a thematic standpoint, it makes the most sense. If you're going to do Slaanesh, you're going to do High Elves. And it is generally expected that it is going to be High Elves, Slaanesh, and a third race. Now, I might eat my words on what that third race will be from my perspective. But with regards to Vampire Counts, obviously Neferata is the obvious choice. Like, you look at this location over here in the Blasted Waste, this is a starting position. Pretty much. This is a starting province that they're going to give to Neferata, and it makes perfect sense for a lot of reasons. But I think Neferata would make sense as part of a Nagash DLC or an Undead DLC. With her, Nagash, and likely the Skaven, or even the Vampire Coast. Though they could also do something else with regards to the Vampire Coast. But the most likely candidate, for a large number of reasons, is going to be the Dark Elves. Why I think it makes sense, beyond thematic reasons, lore reasons, right? Because of Slaanesh's attachment to elves in general. I mean, there's more reasons, logical reasons from a lore perspective to do Wood Elves as opposed to Dark Elves. Though I am highly skeptical that Creative Assembly would do Wood Elves. They could. It would be nice, but I do think it makes most sense to do Slaanesh because of the relationship between Slaanesh and Dark Elves. I mean, Malekith literally summoned Nakari in Ulthuan. And then you have Morafi's entire character. But if you're updating Slaanesh, if you're updating High Elves, both of which need substantial rework, Slaanesh makes the most sense from a gameplay standpoint. Because if they don't update Dark Elves, then they're going to be left behind and you're going to create imbalance in the campaign map. And there's already plenty of issues in this corner of the campaign map, so if they were to update Dark Elves, the entire northwestern corner of the campaign map would end up being far better for it, from my point of view. So that is a gameplay reason. There's also a lore reason behind it. Another reason has to do with effort. Regardless of what some people might view the Dark Elves as a race, they do work very well within the context of a Warhammer free campaign. And the reason that's so important is it means Creative Assembly can put less effort into the race and more effort on Legendary Lords. Similar to how they did with Omens of Destruction, because they updated Greases, they updated Ogres, they updated Scrag, but they also updated Warzag and Skarsnik. That is a pretty big deal that they did touch up on 4 Legendary Lords that already existed in the same DLC. So, when Norsca, I would hope they actually don't do them as part of this DLC, because we could either have a DLC that gives Norsca not just a 3rd, but also a 4th Legendary Lord, and would also allow Creative Assembly to put more effort into improving Norsca as a race on the campaign map. And do they need it? One of the problems has to do with the way you will gain allegiance of the gods and the whole dance of having to sack a settlement because you need the income from sacking settlement, then waiting a turn to raise it and then rebuild it because that is the gameplay loop you're going for at the moment to Norsca. It isn't great. Then there's their entire research tree, there's lords, heroes, units, unit recruitment, income. Basically, Norsca needs to be rebuilt from the ground up to be a perfectly viable race. And that is a lot of effort. Maybe even more effort than Slaanesh, who does need a lot of work. Maybe even more effort than Slaanesh, and certainly more effort than either High Elves, but especially Dark Elves, would require. From a campaign gameplay standpoint, or unit balancing standpoint, legendary lord mechanic standpoint, like, I do want Wulfric to actually feel like Wulfric. I want him to have those mechanics, and I also want a redesign of Trog's voice acting, rebalancing of the monster hunts, handling of that entire system. There's a lot of parts that Norsca has, and a lot of those parts just don't work, because they're not a Warhammer 2 race, they're a Warhammer 1 race that has gotten a couple of updates, but nothing substantial enough to fix their underlying gameplay issues. So there's a lot of things they could do with that. And then we could talk about where Norsca would fit in far more as a race in terms of DLC. There's this weird lighting effect over here if I move the camera there. Okay. So where would I think it would make more sense to add Norsca as a DLC race? Well, there's two options as far as I see it. One would be a pirate-themed or sea-themed DLC, which would include Vampire Coast, which would include Cafe, specifically Yin, or Lizardmen. So you could have either Lizardmen or Cafe. Pick your poison type situation. And you could have Skeggy. So I think that would be very sensible. And Norsca would be the primary chaos race of that DLC, and would get not just one, but 2 legendary lords as part of it. That, I think, would be the more ideal solution with respect to doing Norsca in a DLC. They would be the center stage race. Creative Assembly would add more content for them or more effort for them than the other races in it. And I think that would work out the best. So you would have Norsca, Coast, and either Lizardmen or Cafe. Depending on how Creative Assembly wants to do that. The second option with Norsca, and the one they could also consider, would be part of an Empire DLC. So you'd have Norsca, you would have the Empire to add Valten, Boris Tauntbringer, certain other updates. You might say, well, the Empire already got a DLC. Sure, but the Empire has a lot of stuff that they could add in the game. And I do think, like, we need Valten. From that perspective, we need that in the game. So you'd have Empire, Norsca, and then some possibilities of a third race would either be the Wood Elves. Yes, there is one particular character they could add for the Wood Elves. Or it would be Beastmen, if they were to do a DLC with 2 chaos races. Or something else, right? They could go with something else if they really wanted to. But instead of having Norsca part of a DLC where clearly Slaanesh is going to be the prime focus, because it is the race they announced first, it is the race that is going to get 2 legendary lords, I'd rather have Norsca be the prime faction in a DLC like that. So those are my reasons as to why I think it would not make sense for Creative Assembly to do Norsca right now. We know they have at least a couple of DLCs going forward. To put it like this, from a DLC perspective. So we're going to get the Slaanesh High Elf, likely Dark Elf DLC. That's the first one. Then we're likely to get Dogs of War. And that is by the end of this year, hopefully, or early next year. I think, like, Omens of Destruction has shown us that releasing something in early December is questionable in quite a few ways, but it is something Creative Assembly could do again. Though it would probably be better late November from that perspective. So the Elven DLC with Slaanesh, or Slaanesh with elves. Then you'd have a DLC about the Monkey King. And one could argue about the Monkey King, but with the Monkey King you would have the Fire Dragon as well. And then you would have Tzeentch potentially as a race, because yeah, there is a character that they've talked about with regards to Tzeentch. And depending on how they want to treat the Fire Dragon in the cafe situation, whether or not they make the Monkey King pure cafe and consider him part of cafe and make the Fire Dragon FLC, or they decide to make those two Legendary Lords paid a third race like Lizardmen or Coast or anything like that as part of the DLC. But then so that would be, those are 3 DLCs already. So the Monkey King DLC, the Slaanesh DLC, the Dogs of War DLC, and then you would have a DLC with Norsca and the Empire, or a sea-focused DLC, but then finally the last DLC for the game, and that's where I think we're going to get the Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings update. What they do with Coast is a discussion. They could do it as part of the DLC, they could do it earlier, maybe it will make sense to do it earlier. But Vampire Counts, I think it would make sense to have a situation where you're adding Nagash as a quote-unquote Tomb King, though unique Tomb King. You're adding Neferata for Vampire Counts, and you're adding Tanquil for the Skaven. That is my perspective on how Creative Assembly should do things to a degree. How exactly they'll do, specific things for those races, because there's opportunities, right? There's room to maneuver if they want it. Now, I might end up eating my words on this. They could just very well announce that they're going to do Norsca today or over the next few days. It will be interesting to see how they handle those announcements. Will they, because we know High Elves are coming. It is, I find it extremely unlikely they won't do High Elves. The question is, are they going to announce High Elves now and keep us in suspense until the end? Or are they going to announce High Elves last, but we'll all know High Elves will be last? I know people will be disappointed regardless. However, I should point out, I did a poll on my channel. I asked people which race they want. While it wasn't a majority, the largest share of the votes went to Dark Elves in that poll. Just worth pointing out. Kosin, signing out.